With some more breaking news about these WNBA owners, they have put another $1 million proposal on the table. Guys, for this one here,
you are not going to believe what is happening in the WNBA right now. The league just put an absolutely massive, game-changing salary increase on the table for the players. And what did the Players Association do? They rejected it almost instantly. And I'm not talking about a small pay bump here. We're talking about quadrupling salaries, skyrocketing the minimum salary to a life-changing $225,000, and making the average salary a cool $500,000 a year. The league's front office must have thought this was an absolute slam dunk, a no-brainer that would be celebrated across the sport. But instead of popping champagne, they are now facing a potential lockout that could derail everything. And the reasons why this is all falling apart are completely and utterly wild. I need you to drop a comment right now. Seriously, should the WNBA players take this deal and run, or are they completely justified in rejecting it, even with that massive pay raise on the line? I genuinely want to know where you stand on this, because this debate is getting incredibly heated. The WNBA Players Association just made a move that has the entire league, and its billionaire owners, absolutely panicking. They looked at a financial offer that would literally transform player compensation overnight, and essentially said, nah, we're good. And because of that, we are now staring straight down the barrel of a potential lockout that could completely destroy all the incredible momentum the league has built over this past year. This is shaping up to be one of the most fascinating and high-stakes labor disputes in modern sports history, because you can actually see legitimate points on both sides. But make no mistake, the players are taking a colossal risk here, a gamble that could backfire in the most spectacular and devastating way imaginable.
With more on the WNBA-CBA negotiations, we have some new developments, and we welcome in our WNBA reporter, Alexa Philippou. Alexa, what more can you tell us about where things stand at the moment?
Yeah, George, well, there was a lot of meeting, a lot of back and forth over the last few weeks in hopes of trying to get some movement as yesterday's extension neared. And I can report that, we saw a report a few weeks ago on the league's proposals to the players. I actually have some updated numbers I'd like to share you all of where the league's latest proposal stands. Right now, they are offering a deal with a salary for players at the maximum with a $1 million guaranteed base, projected revenue sharing, pushing those total earnings for maximum players to more than $1.2 million. Sources have told me just now. The average salary projection under this deal, the average salary across the board is projected to exceed $500,000. The minimum salary would be projected to exceed $225,000, sources tell me. And the salary cap would actually increase to $5 million a year, and sources say would be directly tied to revenue growth each.
So let's really dig into the details of what the league actually offered, because when you look at it on paper, it sounds absolutely incredible. The WNBA came to the table and proposed raising the minimum salary to $225,000. Now let's put that in perspective for a second. Just a few short years ago, that minimum was hovering around $60,000. This isn't just a small bump. We're talking about a move that creates generational wealth for players who, up until now, were genuinely struggling to make ends meet in the offseason. On top of that, the average salary would jump to an astonishing $500,000. And the max salary would hit $1 million, guaranteed, with even more opportunities to earn over $1.2 million through revenue sharing. These are financial figures that would have seemed like a complete fantasy just 5 years ago. For even more context, think about this. When Caitlin Clark, the biggest star in the league's was drafted, the starting salaries were around. Now the league is proposing a starting salary of $225,000 for incoming rookies. That's a nearly 300% increase in just a couple of years. Any truly reasonable person looking at these numbers, at this monumental leap forward, would think the players would immediately sign on the dotted line and start celebrating this historic win. But that is not what happened at all. Instead, the Players Association is reportedly planning to formally reject this offer. And the reasons they're giving for this rejection are raising some very serious questions about whether they or their leadership have a firm grasp on basic economics.
That the WNBA came up with a 6-week extension until January the 6th for these negotiations. Now they got a 48-hour window to where the players could say, you know what, We want to cancel out this extension. We want to go on strike.
According to the reports that are leaking out, the rejection stems partly from what the players call vague pay scale projections, and some very real concerns about the league's math. And you know what? Here's where it gets really interesting, because on this point, they're not wrong. The WNBA proposed that $500,000 average salary, but they coupled it with a salary cap of $5 million per team for 12 players. If you pull out your calculator and do that quick math, you'll see it doesn't quite add up to a 500. For that average to be possible, the salary cap would need to be $6 million per team. So, the players are absolutely right to call out that inconsistency. That's a completely legitimate concern that demands clarification. The league's response is that the salary cap would increase over the life of the new collective bargaining agreement and would be directly tied to the league's revenue growth each year. But here's the problem. The specific revenue sharing details, the actual percentages, haven't been disclosed. Players want, and frankly deserve, to know exactly how much of the league's revenue they're getting a piece of. They want total transparency on all the calculations. They don't want to sign on to vague promises that might not ever materialize. That's fair. Any union worth its salt that's negotiating a labor agreement should demand absolute clarity on those details. But here's where the Players Association starts to completely lose public support and enters the realm of the absurd. One of their other major sticking points with this proposal is that the league is no longer offering to provide free housing for the players. Right now, teams provide housing during the regular season and postseason. Under this new deal, players would have to find their own housing, and apparently this is a potential deal breaker for the union. Let me break down for you exactly why that stance is so ridiculous. If your minimum salary is $225,000, you can absolutely 100% afford to rent an apartment for a few months. The average rent for a nice place in most WNBA cities is maybe at the absolute most $3,000 a month. Even if you're paying that for a full 6 months, that's only you are still taking home over $200,000 after both taxes and housing. For players making the average salary of $500,000, housing costs become an even smaller, almost insignificant fraction of their income. This is not a legitimate hardship. The only real exception here would be for players on temporary or short-term contracts, the ones who are with a team for very minimal periods. Those players might genuinely need some housing assistance because they're bouncing between teams and making far less money. The league could and should easily carve out an exception for those specific situations. But for players on actual contracts making deep six-figure salaries, demanding that billionaire owners continue to provide them with free housing is just incredibly tone deaf. The optics of this are absolutely terrible for the players. The general public hears about athletes making hundreds of thousands of dollars complaining about having to pay for their own apartments, and they lose all sympathy in an instant. It makes the players look entitled and completely out of touch with the reality that everyday people face. Most Americans would kill for a $225,000 salary and would be more than happy to figure out their own housing. This single complaint makes the players look like they have no idea how good they're about to have it. Now, to be fair, there are other, more legitimate issues with the proposal. The league wants to extend the season and start it earlier, which could directly interfere with March Madness. That's a problem for a couple of big reasons. First, March Madness is basically a free multi-million-dollar marketing campaign for the WNBA. It's the platform where future stars build their brands and generate massive excitement before they even enter the league. Caitlin Clark became a household name during March Madness. Paige Bueckers is building her entire profile through March Madness right now. Cutting into that tournament to start the WNBA season earlier would be like shooting themselves in the foot. The league's justification is that they want to avoid competing with the NFL and college football for viewership in the fall. They want to capture sports fans' attention during a less crowded part of the calendar. That does make some business sense, I'll grant them, but sacrificing the fire hose of free promotion that March Madness provides just seems incredibly short-sighted. The WNBA should be figuring out how to complement March Madness, not compete with. The other motivation for starting earlier is to squeeze out competing startup leagues like Unrivaled and Project B. Those leagues operate in the WNBA's off-season, and the WNBA wants to eliminate that option for its players by extending its own season. That's just a pure, ruthless, competitive business strategy. Crush your competition before they can gain any real traction. But it's really unclear whether manipulating the schedule to achieve that is worth all the negative trade-off. And this is where we have to talk about the elephant in the room: the very real potential for a lockout. If the players reject this offer and the negotiations completely break down, we could be looking at a dark scenario where there is no WNBA season at all. The owners are billionaires, and with that comes massive egos. They do not like being told no, especially when they feel like they're offering to quadruple salaries out of their own pockets. Remember, these owners have never turned a profit with the W. For years, they've been subsidizing the league, losing money, waiting for this moment. They are finally seeing real growth and momentum, and now the players are rejecting what they consider to be an incredibly generous offer. Billionaires do not respond well to being challenged like this. We've already seen hints of that ego, with reports that some owners want Commissioner Kathy Engelbert gone, but won't fire her now because they don't want to look weak during negotiations. That is pure ego talking. That's billionaires refusing to be pushed around. And when egos get deeply involved in labor disputes, things get ugly fast. A lockout right now would be absolutely catastrophic for the WNBA. The league just had its best year ever, thanks in large part to Caitlin Clark, bringing millions of new fans to the sport. Ratings are through the roof. Attendance is way up. Sponsorship deals are finally rolling in. All this momentum is building. A lockout would destroy all of that in an instant. Casual fans who just started paying attention would simply move on to something else. Sponsors would pull their money back. The entire infrastructure that's been so carefully built over the past year would crumble into dust. And here is the brutal, honest reality. The players have far less leverage than they seem to think they do. The owners can afford to wait this out. They're billionaires. Missing a season doesn't hurt them financially in any meaningful way. But the player missing a season means missing an entire year of income at a point in their athletic careers when they don't have many years to begin with. The average WNBA career is painfully short. Missing even one season is devastating. The players also seem to be operating under the false assumption that the league needs them more than they need the league. That might have been true in the past, but Caitlin Clark fundamentally changed that equation. She is the one driving this growth. She is the reason ratings and attendance have exploded. If the season gets canceled and Caitlin decides to focus entirely on her multi-million-dollar endorsements and playing overseas, what happens to the league? Do all those casual fans who showed up specifically for her stick around without her? The answer is probably not. That's not to diminish the incredible contributions of other players. A'ja Wilson is a phenomenon. Breanna Stewart is an all-time great. There's real, deep talent throughout the league, but none of them, not one, moved the needle the way Caitlin did. None of them brought this level of mainstream attention. The Players Association needs a reality check, and needs to understand that their leverage is not nearly as strong as they think it is, especially if this dispute drags on and risks alienating the very star who's responsible for most of the league's recent growth. The complaints about the math are legitimate and absolutely should be addressed. If the league is promising an average salary of $500,000, but the salary cap doesn't support that, they need to open the books and explain how it works. Revenue sharing details need to be crystal clear. Players deserve to know exactly what they're agreeing to. Those are all reasonable demands. But fighting over housing when you're making hundreds of thousands of dollars is not reasonable. Rejecting a deal that would completely transform player salaries because you don't want to pay rent is not reasonable. And risking a lockout that could destroy the league's momentum over these kinds of issues is definitely not reasonable. The Players Association is playing an incredibly dangerous game of chicken, and they don't seem to realize how much they and the entire sport have to lose. There's also the issue of those competing leagues trying to poach talent. Project B is offering huge salaries to lure players away. If there's a lockout and players need a place to play and earn a paycheck, those leagues suddenly become much more attractive. That could permanently fracture the talent pool and weaken the WNBA in the long term. The owners know this and might be willing to let a lockout happen just to establish dominance and send a clear message that the players can't hold the league hostage. The Players Association is betting that the owners will blink first, that the league has invested too much in this current growth to risk losing it all to a labor dispute. They're betting that public pressure will force the owners to give in, but that is a massive, massive gamble. Billionaires don't operate on logic when their egos are on the line. They operate on pride, and right now the owners probably feel like they've made an incredibly generous offer that the players are spitting on. The irony in all of this is that both sides actually want the exact same thing: a thriving, profitable league that generates more revenue so that everyone involved makes more money. But they can't agree on how to get there or how to split the pot. The owners want more control and flexibility. The players want guarantees and transparency. Those aren't necessarily incompatible goals, but reaching them requires compromise. And right now, neither side seems willing to give in. The housing issue is particularly frustrating because it's such an easy fix. Create a stipend for players on temporary contracts. Give them housing assistance because they genuinely need it. But for players making hundreds of thousands of dollars, they can figure it out, just like every other professional athlete in every other major sport. NBA players don't get free housing. NFL players don't get free housing. Why should WNBA players expect it? The schedule manipulation to interfere with March Madness and competing leagues is more complicated. There are legitimate business reasons for the league to want more control over its calendar, but there are also legitimate concerns about sacrificing free marketing. That's a negotiation worth having. But ultimately, this whole mess comes down to one simple question: are the players willing to risk everything they've gained over this past year for incremental improvements to an already historic offer? Because that's exactly what they're doing. They're gambling the entire momentum of the league on the belief that the owners will cave rather than let it all fall apart. And based on how billionaires typically operate in labor disputes, that is a very, very bad bet. So there you have it. The WNBA offered life-changing money, and the players said, no thanks. Now we are all headed toward a potential lockout that could ruin everything. If you want to follow this unfolding disaster, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. Do you think the players are making a huge mistake, or are they right to hold firm for a better deal? Let me know what you think in the comments below.